Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Living Your Greatness. This is your host, Ben Mumme, and today we have a new guest to the show, and her name is Lynette Zang. So for those of you that don't know Lynette, she is a Chief Market Analyst at ITM Trading, and she has been in the markets on some level since 1964. She has also been a banker and a stockbroker and studied world currencies since 1987. So Lynette, welcome to the show. It's good to have you on.
Benjamin, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here today.
Yeah, I'm super stoked to have you on, especially because, we met already, a month ago in Vancouver. So it's nice to kind of see you in real life as well as meet you. And I had mentioned to you at the time, I loved your bubbly personality, but more importantly, I'm super pumped today to hop in and kind of share with everyone your expertise and kind of things that make you tick. So just starting off, Lynette, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you spend your formative years growing up, and what inspired you to become a chief market analyst?
Well, I spent my years, I was born in Kingston, New York, which is in the Catskill Mountains. For those that aren't familiar with it, they may have heard of Rip Van Winkle. And so that's the area that I grew up in. And to be really honest with you, Benjamin, I don't know that I ever thought that I was going to be a chief market analyst, but I knew from a very young age that I was supposed to do something that had a positive impact on a lot of people. And so I really spent most of my life looking for what that was. And, I was 10 in 1964, so I was young at that point. But yeah, I feel like I have been guided toward this work, and I do know that this is exactly what I was born to do, to be here, to translate financial noise, to help people make educated choices that actually put their best interest first, because we cannot count at those in power putting our best interest first. And it should be very clear to everybody, especially after last week. 2008, they put the bankers' best interest first. And just last week, they put the venture capitalists' best interest first. So, we are not too big to fail. We're just about the right size. Although if we all come together in community, that changes drastically. So that's really why I do this. It's what I was put on this planet to do, and how I was guided into banking, and how I was guided into stock brokering, and how I was guided into discovering currency life cycles, which is a very big deal. Because if I hadn't stumbled across one day as a new stockbroker, non-dollar denominated bonds, which are all about currencies, I would not understand what's happening any more than pretty much anybody else I listen to, out there. They don't really understand what's happening and why what's happening is inevitable. And it's simply because we are absolutely at the end of this currency's life cycle with all the repeatable patterns.
Absolutely. And no, I appreciate you for giving that humble kind of start there of, who you are, and also sharing, that this is part of your purpose, right? To kind of give back, all your expertise that you've gotten since you were 15 years old. And I kind of want to dive deeper. I kind of want to start there. So,
okay.
Lynette, I know when you were 15, right, your uncle's expertise in high-end dealing had an influence on your early interest in gold and as well as collectibles. So are there any memorable stories that you would like to share with my listeners?
Well, actually, I remember this from being 10 years old, which was the first time that I ever collected anything. And as a very high-end antique dealer, it wasn't just really about the gold. It was about tangible assets. And what he really taught me was how tangible assets always move. From undervaluation to fair valuation to overvaluation to fair valuation to undervaluation. And that is a constant movement. And he also taught me that good is always good. And so then when my parents and I were visiting him in his house, and he said, come here, I want to show you something. And he took us in a back bedroom where he had 2 tall floor safes. And, he opened the doors and he said, if anything should happen to me, Aunt Bertie will be well taken care of for the rest of her life because of what's in these safes. And so turned around and looked, and what he had were $20 gold coins in there, and you couldn't fit one more in. Now, in 1964, it was illegal, and I didn't recognize this at the time. I was 10 years old. What do I know about that? But I certainly looked, right? And I'd say he probably had, knowing what I know now, at least 3,000 ounces of gold coins. So he would go into wealthy households and he would buy porcelains or glass or whatever he was going to buy. And then they would have these coins. And so he was probably buying them for somewhere maybe a little bit more than spot, which was $35 an ounce at that time. And so he had about 3,000 ounces at least, maybe even more. But, the lessons that I got from him, believe me, I thank him every day. I'm definitely a tangible gal, and it's wealth that you can move. And it's also the kind of wealth that's called dynastic wealth, which is wealth that lasts in families at least 300 years. So you can kind of think of, well, now I guess the King of England and how long they've held that wealth. And what does it consist of? It consists of real estate, rare collectibles, not Franklin Mint, really rare collectibles, and gold. And you can actually do all 3 pieces with gold. And I actually have done all 3 pieces with gold. But it's critical because at that time, you couldn't own more than 5 ounces, and yet he had at least 3,000 ounces of the kind of gold that you could use in the normal economy at that time even. So, that did. And I can't say that I really understood it until one day when I was writing, and I said, if you were alive in 1971 like I was, and then all of those memories of his lessons with the gold and also how the tangibles move and all of that, I'm like, oh my God. So that's why I talk about being guided, because you just never know where those good lessons are going to come from, but we have them in our minds. Anybody that was born the same time as I was, I was born in 54, I'm so grateful to be as old as I am and have had that experience that I did, even when we transitioned from at least a quasi-gold back monetary system into a pure debt-based monetary system controlled by the central banks.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm really happy to hear that you had that experience, of not only mentorship, but education, from your uncle. And where later on, when things actually played out, that there was high inflation in like the 1970s, where you realize the value that gold was, right? And that has to do with long-term wealth, which I know you're huge on, right? In terms of educating people and making sure that people are aware so they can protect their wealth. And I also know that, you kind of mentioned since 1964, you've had different perspectives that have obviously contributed to your educational background, right? You were a banker, you were a stockbroker. So my next question I want to ask is, how has the financial industry changed over the years, and what impact do you think these changes have had on the everyday investor?
That is a really great question. And one of the things, when I first became a stockbroker, this was in the 80s, and I was actually there as a new stockbroker on Black Monday. I was about a year in at that point. And I remember so clearly, everything was about globalization, globalization, globalization. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm not really so sure that that's such a great thing. But what it did was it set corporations up to go to different countries. Then I don't really want to use the word rape, but kind of it is, because they knew that they could get labor a whole lot cheaper. And so we had, obviously in the US, but we had a lot of our industries, like I remember going down to the clothing district in Manhattan. I went to school at Fairleigh Dickinson in Teaneck, New Jersey, right? So I remember going to the garment district in New York, and I mean, it was hustling and bustling and lots of carts and everything. And that doesn't even exist anymore, right? So a lot of the industry and the productivity was shipped to different countries, notably China as one. Additionally, back then, when I was first a stockbroker, nobody ever talked about you outliving your retirement. If you had, $1 million, you could have put them in, at that point, safer treasury bonds and generated like 100,000 a year, which was a lot of money at that period of time. Because in the early 70s, the average wage was like $9,500, and a family of four could live on that with one wage earner. But today, the average wage is something like 57,000. And so what the inflation does and the control of the central banks do is they create what's called nominal confusion, and people get blinded by numbers. So when they see the stock market or the bond market or any of the markets going up, then they get FOMO, fear of missing out, right? But what's really happening, and the real trend that the markets hide, is the purchasing power value of the currencies. And, at that period of time, and I remember it really well because I had a 5-year CD paying me 15% interest, right? So what Paul Volcker did, the then chairman, Federal Reserve chair, is he pushed interest rates all the way up to intraday 21.5%, closing at like 18.5%. But what that provided was a lot of ramp room for the central bank to control the rate and speed of inflation by using interest rates. So every time that the economy would head into a recession, they would drop interest rates like 5.5 to 5.75%. That would inspire borrowing and spending, and borrowing, that's how money is created. So it would create new money into the system. And then they would drop interest rates down more. So now we've been anchored at zero since 2009, even with a lot of negative rates, which at the moment there's no negative rates, but we've been really anchored near zero since 2009. This has inspired a lot of corporate as well as individual borrowing. That's really what it does, right? It encourages people and corporations and governments to take on more and more and more and more debt. But we are now at a point where every single time, every single country that has attempted to raise interest rates since 2009 and attempted as well to run off some of that debt from their balance sheet, it has been a big, fat fail. They cannot do it. So the big problem, and like I said, I can't even begin to tell you how grateful I am to the universe for guiding me in this direction, because where can you go if you look at, like in the US, we have what's called the FRED, F-R-E-D, and it's the Federal Reserve Education Department. And I use that site a lot, but my very favorite graph is the purchasing power of the consumer dollar, because that's where the real trend is. But hey, look over here, because it's moving and it's volatile. don't look over here at the loss of purchasing power, right? So we officially have 3 cents worth of purchasing power left out of the original dollar's worth of purchasing power, and we're anchored at 0. Okay, well, we're at the end. But there are a lot of repeatable patterns, war being one, also women's rights being another thing, civil liberties being another thing, energy being another thing. I mean, there are just repeatable patterns that happen 100% of the time at a currency's end of its life cycle. And do I think this time is different? No, I don't, because I can see it. And it's very obvious to me. And that's why having physical gold and physical silver in your possession is critically important, because they need a big crisis to push everybody into this new fully surveillance system, the central bank digital currencies. And I don't know that they're really quite ready yet. And this doesn't happen really easily. You know, it isn't like, oh, all right, well, one day we're on this system, one day we're on that system. No. That transition between systems is very, very, very painful for the public. Although there are those that benefit.
Totally, for sure. So much valuable content that you just shared there for my listeners. But something that I want to pinpoint or focus on is, you really expressed, concern about hyperinflation, right? And
Yes.
you obviously mentioned, the importance of having gold and silver. But can you share any historical examples of hyperinflation and the impact it had on society, and what lessons we could learn from those experiences?
Well, we don't even have to really go back very far. All we have to do is look to Zimbabwe, where they have billionaires that can't buy 3 eggs. But they've recently come out with a 1-ounce coin. Now, goodness gracious, who in Zimbabwe can afford that 1-ounce gold coin to protect the rest of their purchasing power? The wealthy, the 1%, not the general public. Look at Venezuela. You've got 90% of the population in abject poverty. I didn't say 100%. You said 90%. So the general public, I have my mantra: food, water, energy, security, barterability, wealth preservation, community, and shelter, because these are all of the things that we need to sustain a reasonable standard of living. And for those that have all of that in place, and by the way, I do put medications under food because, there are people that's life-saving for. But if we don't have those things in place, then you look at what happened to the populations. I mean, and there are so many. There's Lebanon. There's Ghana. I mean, there's so many current examples of hyperinflation and Turkey. I mean, and how that impacts the public. So you've got to be, it is so critical to be as independent and self-sufficient inside of a community as possible. So arguably, I mean, you want to get your wealth positioned, but one person can't do it all. And that's why, you and I had talked about, I have a bug out location, and I've been planning on and building everything towards supporting at least 40 people there, which it would be a little crowded at this moment if it happened, but I could do it. I've got everything set up that I can accommodate, 40 people. I hope we have more time so that I can get other residences built out, but we have as much time as we have.
I love those examples that you just brought up there about, just hyperinflation and all these unfortunate situations that are happening around our world. And then I love how you shifted and you spoke about your motto, right? You just gave many examples that are very important for people to kind of take concern of or thought of, and a question that I have that leads to this is I think a lot of those things are related to our wealth. And I don't just mean financial.
Mhm.
I also mean personal wealth. I mean,
Mhm.
social wealth, right? The list goes on.
Mental
So
wealth. Yes.
so my question to you is, Lynette, how do you define wealth, and what are some ways individuals can build and preserve it beyond just financial investments? If you could just go a little bit further in some of those things that you mentioned from your motto before.
Absolutely. Well, I think kind of, lumping all of those things into one, I would say your health. It is your health is a key part of your wealth. I know a number of very wealthy people, but they are so unhealthy. They can't even enjoy the monetary wealth that they have. I think it's having really strong relationships with people that love you, that you love. I learned a long time ago, and I'll tell you what, it's paying off in spades. With everybody that works with me that aren't maybe blood related, let's just say, but they still have come in as part of the team and part of the family. What I have learned is, first of all, you can buy somebody's time. That's not really that big of a deal, but you cannot buy somebody's heart. They have to give you that. They have to give you their heart. And the only way that you can expect them to give you their heart is if you give them your heart. And so you treat people with love and respect and care. And then guess what? You've got dreams and things that come together, and that's where the magic lies. And I think that's also where so much of the mental health lies and wealth. I mean, I have, even though, and here's the other thing, what I work in all the time is ugly and nasty and makes me angry and, all of that. So I surround myself with a lot of beauty because that counterbalances all that negativity. I know a lot of people and they just read all of this horrible stuff, read it. And boy, it just gets them really depressed and it really takes them into a very negative space. So it's also about living your passion, living your purpose, being respectful, and of others. And I'm not going to say that I'm never taken advantage of because that would not be true, but it doesn't happen often. And I have a whole team of people around me now that protect me and will, tell me when they see me making some choices that might not be great, right? They have the confidence to go in my face and say, hey, look at this. And because I know that they love me and they care about me, I don't question what their motives are because I know that they have my best interest at heart, just like I have their best interest at heart. So, when you talk about wealth, you have wealth in every single area, right? But you have to do this. You have to open your arms and you have to give what you have to give. And then you have to be open to receiving what you're supposed to receive. And that was a very hard won lesson that really I got in my 30s because nobody lives a life unscathed. And you didn't ask me this, but I'm going to tell you that, like I said, nobody lives a life unscathed. And I've had more than my share of crash and burns because I am an entrepreneur. I mean, it's just the nature of the beast. And when I ended up going to France when I was 38. And I only remember that because people would ask me how old I was, and I would say 38, which is 38. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't remember because that period of my life is a little bit of a blur. But I had gone through the first time I ever knew I could fail, right? And that's kind of shocking if you're a kind of person that kind of pushes through and does not think they can ever fail, because I could just white knuckle my way through this and make it happen. I was in a major depression for like 3 years. I mean, I knew how I was going to kill myself, where I was going to do it. I mean, I knew everything. And that was really all I could think about. But I also had twin daughters that I did not love myself at that point because I was carrying a tremendous amount of shame and a tremendous amount of guilt. But I loved them. And the only thing, honestly, that kept me from leaving this planet, because I really wanted to, boy, did I really want to, was that I would not put that on them, because they would have spent the rest of their lives trying to figure out what they could have done to save me. And so they saved my life, no doubt. But I knew that I got to a point where, you can only live at the bottom of the barrel for so long. And you either have to finish the job or you have to get healthy again. And so for them, I knew that I had to get healthy. And I was fortunate enough to be able to stick them on a plane to their father right after summer school. And then I got on a plane and I went to France, where I didn't know anybody and I couldn't speak the language. And I brought a backpack with all the stuff that I thought that I needed. Bathing suits, books, headlamps. I mean, things I thought I needed. And when I got there, and I brought a tent with me, and I bought a boy's bike, and I went off into the countryside, biking, camping at night. And I had a little bit of money. I didn't have much money at that point. I had a little bit. And there are so many stories from that experience. But the one that I really like to share is when I found my purpose, because I knew that I was doing what I was guided to do, even into the crash and burn. But we can be so arrogant to think that we know how things are supposed to work. And we really don't. We really don't. And so it was toward the end of the trip, and I was lucky enough to have about 3 months. It took about 6 weeks, actually, for the first day that I remember actually feeling good. And I was in the middle of these cornfields, and the sky was just this robin's egg blue. I mean, it was just a perfect day. It was the first day I went 60 kilometers, which I can't even tell you what that is because we work on miles here, but that was the thing on the bike. So 60 kilometers. And all of a sudden, the first vision of what I had been blocking, because I couldn't see it, it was too painful, came up and literally like, boom, right in my face. And it really did almost knock me off my bike. It was so powerful. And I didn't always have money for food, but I always made sure that I had a pad and something to write with. And I to this day, I haven't really actually gone in and read what I wrote back then. And I didn't think about what I was writing. I just allowed whatever to come out to go ahead and come out. But that was the start of my healing. And it was interesting because that whole trip, I never saw what I needed to see until I was feeling really good. So it was kind of interesting that that's when I would get those visions. But it was toward the end of my trip, and I was 38. So, and I was a woman. So there were things that I thought I needed. And I went into this little village, and there was a little bar to back there. And I walk in, and it's a female proprietress. And I thought, excellent, because she's going to understand and be able to help me. I had maybe 3 francs or 4 francs left, which is no money. And what I thought I needed was like 1 more franc than what I had. So that wasn't that bad. I didn't think that was that bad. And so I brought it up to the counter and I explained my situation, and she wouldn't sell it to me. I had this great headlamp that was worth a whole lot more than what I thought I needed, and she wouldn't barter with me. And I left there, and I was passing judgment on her. I'm going, I would have never done that, blah, 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 blah. And then I went, wait. The only thing that you can do is be true to who you are. That's all you can do. I had toilet paper. I had plastic. This is not, an insurmountable crisis. I can deal with this. So off I go. Now, I couldn't tell you where I was because I didn't even have a map at that point. But I go maybe 2 hours later and I go over this rise and I see up on this beautiful hillside, this massive field of wild strawberries. And those were my favorite because at that point, I was just eating what I found on the side of the road. I had, virtually no money left. And so I parked my bike and I went up on the hill and I ate my fill of strawberries and I packed some for my dinner that night. And I looked down and over in this little area, there was this white car with a woman and a man in there. And they were probably in their late 60s was my guess. And I thought to myself, now, how come they're not up here taking advantage of these wild strawberries? I mean, they're teeny, but they have the most incredible flavor. And so I did what was in my nature to do, which was I picked a couple handfuls of strawberries and I went down to the car. Now you have to understand, I'm camping. So I'm bathing in streams and I had 2 changes of clothing. And so I probably didn't look very nice, nor did I might not have even smelled all that great, to be honest with you. But the woman was sitting in the passenger side. And she rolled down her window, and at that point I could speak. My grammar probably was bad, but I could definitely make myself understood in French. And so I asked them, would they like some wild strawberries? And the woman said to me, no, but would you like a cheese sandwich? And I thought, cha-ching, protein. And they had a picnic basket in their trunk. And so we got out and they gave me a cheese sandwich. And then she said to me, would you like a cool drink of water? And I would fill my plastic water bottles up in artesian wells as I would go through the villages. And yeah, they would get warm. And so I said, well, yes, thank you. I would like a cool drink of water. And then she said to me, would you like an apricot? Well, let me tell you, you did not find apricots along the side of the road unless they were in a fruit stand, and I could not afford that. So I said, well, I would love an apricot, but why are you doing this? It's not necessary. I'm getting goosebumps. That woman, it was like she was looking into my soul. And she said to me, you wanted to share what you have with us. We want to share what we have with you. And, remember for like 2.5 months here, I'm trying to figure out why I'm on this planet. And as soon as she said those words, I 100% knew the reason why we're all here, which is to share the gifts that we have been given. And I've been given a lot of gifts. So I like to share, but that woman, that circumstance, from the blackest part of my entire life, the blackest part, came the greatest gift. So there you go. That's why I do what I do.
And I love that. I really appreciate you for sharing that inspiring story of being very transparent and also having like the courage to share your story of, not perfection, right? Of those challenges of other things that affect your overall well-being and your wealth, right?
Yes.
And I really, appreciate that because, especially emotionally, if we're thrown off, it can really affect other areas of our life, right? And so you said
every area.
Once you had that moment where you found like your purpose, it brought so much to you, right? And it brought so much to want to give back and to continue to live and to continue to thrive, right? And that came from like a moment, but also from community, right? From other people that you connected with. And
exactly.
So I want to like take that story and kind of bring it in terms of, like, I know you speak a lot about community, right? You're huge on that. And
Mhm.
how do people, rather than through surviving through financial crises, how can individuals build supportive communities to thrive and develop together financial confidence?
Well, there are a number of ways to do it. I mean, just this past weekend in the small little neighborhood that I live in, they do a home tour. Well, I don't let people into my home, but I do let them into I've converted my house into an urban farm, my property. And so I had about 2,000 people walk through, and they were actually really amazed. People are always amazed at what you can grow in Arizona because they don't think you can really grow anything. And I have plums and almonds and peaches and mulberries and everything. Everything. So one of the ways that you can do that is get involved in community gardens, right? There are these groups here. I don't know if you have them in Canada, but I would think they're global, where they have what they call meetups. And I know that I participated when I was first starting my urban garden, my urban farm. I participated in the meetups, and you meet a lot of like-minded people, which I know that a lot of people that see what's happening now. I mean, for many years, I think people are more open to what's happening because it's more obvious today. But for ever so many years, I mean, I'm kind of used to being called eccentric or crazy, or I don't know what I'm talking about, except I'm a database decision maker. I'm equally analytical and creative, right? So I go back and forth with my brain on that stuff constantly. It's just how I think. But most people, they're just very linear. But I think, and so people feel alone. If they've tried to explain to their family members or their friends what's happening, and their friends are stuck in this normalcy bias, they feel, that's what I found a lot, which is why what you and I are doing right now, for me, this is part of building the community. That's why I'm always happy to do it. And I don't really even care how many subscribers somebody has or doesn't have. Because it's part of community building. And the more people that do become aware of what's happening, the more we can come together. And that means that we get to have some choices. Because my concern is that all of our choices, they've been systematically eroding any protections and any choices that we have. And if we allow those that are in power, the central banks and the governments, and we do end up inside of a full surveillance economy like we see in China, I mean, what choices are you going to have if all you have is what's in their system that they are controlling?
Absolutely. And I think on top of that, when there's a situation like that, that's just so obvious now, or maybe not to everyone, but
right.
I think is becoming more and more obvious because of people like yourself who have had the courage, to speak up, the courage, to share information. And, I always think technology, like, it's beautiful today, how it could be a tool to either, empower, or at the same time, it can be a tool to disempower, right? And I think it's super important, that there's something that you say a lot, which is, I know you're big on independent thinking, right? Because there's so much noise out there, and that can affect our decisions in so many areas of our life, right? Emotionally, physically, right, et cetera. But when it comes to your expertise, in the financial, in finance, how do you balance this with the need to rely on trusted experts and advisors in certain financial situations in terms of decision?
Do your own due diligence, right? The data is there. It's just that people don't know where to go. That's why when I do my videos, I give links to not all my research, because I'd write a book every week, but for all of everything that you see, or even things that I think you need to see. So do your own due diligence. Don't trust anybody blind. Don't do it. You've got to be a lot more self-reliant, and there are easy places to go and look. because as a stockbroker, and I can tell you, I was with Shearson Lehman. And the reason why I went to Shearson at that time was because hands down, they had the best training program on the street, hands down. And I know what they put me through just to hire me. So you think they taught me how to read the technical language of the markets and how to understand what was going on? They taught me, and this was a really intense, they said that they put 250 grand into me, and this was in the 80s. I know they did. I know they did. But what they were really teaching me was how to sell intangibles. It's an invaluable experience. And I'll even give you the one thing that I still use from that today. And I would share this with everybody. And what they would say to me is, instead of beating yourself up because it didn't work out the way you wanted it to work out, you say to yourself, what did I do right to get as far as I got? What can I do right to get even further, right? But no, I don't think that I don't want people to just do what I say. I want you to do your own due diligence, and I would not touch a stockbroker or a financial consultant, or quite honestly, anybody in that, a CFP, right? Because CFPs are trained to sell life insurance products, right? No. Do your own due diligence. And here's a really simple question that you can ask any financial advisor. And if they can't answer it, because I'm going to give you the question and I'm going to give you the answer. If they can't answer it, run. Don't walk, run. Here's the question. In our system, how is currency created and supported? Pretty simple question, right? Here's the answer. Well, the full faith and credit of the government is what supports it. So as long as you trust them, you have faith, then you will continue to loan them money, extend them credit. That's the answer. If they give you any other answer, run. Don't walk. All they're telling you to do is what is in their best interest. And they could have great intentions. I'm not saying that these people are evil. I'm just saying that a lot of them are very, very lazy, and they don't bother to learn what they need to know. As a new stockbroker, I fell into that trap very early because all these gurus were telling me, do this. Okay, well, I'm new. I don't know what I'm doing yet. So I do that. And guess what? It failed. And then what those same gurus were telling me was, now, here's the other thing they told me, which is that people were only doing business with me because of Shearson. But when that thing failed, then I had to be the face. And they said, oh, get on the phone, talk to your clients. They're doing business with us because you have a relationship with them, right? Their job is to sell you into everything. When we're looking at physical gold and silver, that has, and this is so critically important, and I don't hear a lot of people really talk about it, but gold and silver has the broadest base of functionality because it is used in every single aspect, every single sector of the global economy, which means that it also has the broadest base of buyers, right? When you're going into any kind of battle, what do you want? You want one little pop gun, or do you want a whole arsenal? So physical gold and silver in your possession is your arsenal. Any of this other crap that they are going to be selling you is used, it's intangible, and it's used in one area. So when that area fails, when the currency, when people, and they are definitely starting to wake up, rapid inflation makes people lose confidence in the currency and in those that are in power. That's the real reason why they want to keep it controlled. But, I would honestly say that we have to do our own due diligence. Don't take anybody's word for it, because there are just a few simple places. You don't have to know everything, but you do have to understand what those patterns are. And that's what I talk about a lot, is look at this pattern shift, right? Because you don't even have to understand what that means. All you have to know is, oh, wait a minute, there's a shift here. That means something. Could mean something good. It could also mean something bad, but that means something. So you have to be smart. You are smarter. People are smarter than they give themselves credit for. And don't just trust anybody blindly, not anybody.
Absolutely. And I think that's amazing advice. That's exactly why I wanted to ask you that question. I think due diligence is huge, and I'm a huge advocate of that. And I think also knowing that we have so many biases, our own, others, that we need to be curious enough and self-motivated enough to keep learning and knowing that there's so much we don't know. So a question that I have to my last one is, I don't know everything. You don't know everything. We're constantly learning every day, being a continuous learner. And I know Rick Rule always talks about that to the investing community. And I love that about Rick. But a question I have is, who are mentors or, people that you highly respect that you recommend individuals tuning in right now, maybe check out or kind of listen to?
Well, I think it really kind of depends on what it is that you're trying to learn. Oh God, I don't want to say what I'm about to say. The challenge that I have personally is that I really don't know too many other people that understand that this is a currency life cycle issue. And so I'm with a lot of very brilliant people that I absolutely respect a lot, and they really do understand micro and macro and this-o and that-o. But unless you actually understand the real underlying issue, which is the currency's life cycle, then they kind of, as example, we were paying these people, very brilliant people, like 80, 90 grand a year to hear what they had to say on a monthly basis. It's a pretty good chunk of change, right? And for that, we got to have meetings with them. And when I would ask them any question related to that, and I would try it in different ways, every comeback was, well, yeah, we know about that, but we just don't pay attention to it. Great. So that is a really hard question for me, because there are a lot of people that I absolutely do respect. But if you don't really understand the real problem, then you're not going to get the right answers. That's also the due diligence. That's also the Fred chart on purchasing power. But you can do it for any country, and you'll see that the currency's life cycle is at an end, because there is virtually no purchasing power left. And the key tool to regulate that, which is interest rates, they're also having a problem with that. That's why they're trying to raise rates, and they're going to keep raising. And they're going to turn around and pivot in here. And then the only other tool they have is this. And then what does that do? There's your hyperinflation, because there's only one way. This is so simple. There's only one way to fight inflation, and that's with deflation. And there's only one way to fight deflation, and that's with inflation. It's not like you've got a basket of choices, right? The globalization was deflationary. So they kept building inflation into the system. Plus, when they set the system up to begin with, they had two big issues that they wanted to resolve. The government wanted to be able to tax and spend, but when you're on a gold standard, that taxing and spending is obvious. And a citizen at that point had control, because if they didn't like what the government was doing, they would take a bill in, $1 in, and they could walk out with $1 worth of gold, and that created restrictions. So inflation enables governments taxation without going through legislation, because that's that inflation tax that we hear about. For corporations, they wanted to pay you less and less. But if you're used to getting $10 an hour, you're not going to accept 5. However, if they can make that $10 an hour spend like 5, well, guess what? That is exactly what has enabled the income and wealth inequality, and why a family of 4 can no longer live on $9,500 a year, and why what $1 would buy, which was 11 loaves of bread, with a $1 bill, a silver dollar, or a $1 gold coin, which is about half the size of my pinky fingernail, why in 1913, you could buy 11 loaves of bread with any of those 3, but that little $1 gold coin right now is, I just got the retail on it, something like $400 and change. So you can buy like 132 loaves of bread. You're buying maybe a quarter or less of bread with that dollar bill, and you're buying right about the same with the silver. So, inflation creates nominal confusion. People get married to the number. But if you had a $20 bill 20 years ago and you have a $20 bill today, heck, if you had it 2 months ago and you have it today, what that $20 bill buys you is so much less, and it's all by design. So you need to really protect yourself. That's why I say you can't take anybody's word for anything. Do your own due diligence and keep it simple. Gold and silver in your possession is very simple. It's very simple.
I appreciate that answer, Lynette. I think it does a good job at, showing people that you're not trying to persuade them or follow, specific information. I love the fact that you're going straight to the point, explaining what's going on, what's happening with currency, and most importantly, how people can preserve their wealth, especially millennials like myself who are trying to, get a home or make, decisions for a young family, right? So I appreciate that you brought up again gold and silver and how that's obviously.
Let me just speak to the millennium part where you want to buy a home and you want to do this, okay? Well, look, this is a wealth transfer mechanism, but doesn't mean that you can't take advantage of that. And I've done videos on this where, historically speaking, because we've got over 4,800 examples of hyperinflation and currency life cycles. So there's a lot of data out there, although I will tell you some of it is quite difficult to ferret out, but I kind of keep digging. But here's the deal. 25 ounces of gold, historically, on average, can buy an entire city block, buildings and all. So if you want to buy a house right now, even though the prices have started to come down, they're still severely overvalued. And yet you've got gold, and a rising gold price is an indication of a failing currency. They don't want you to know the currency's failing, because then you make different choices, right? So they artificially suppress it by using their Wall Street wizardry to create thousands and thousands of ounces of gold that does not nor ever will exist. But this is going to flip-flop. And don't count on Wall Street to flip-flop it, because if it was a true supply and demand market like the physical only market is, those markets are going up, and in some cases, especially the ultra rarities that only the 1% can afford, they're making new highs, right? So that's where the truth lies, and where it's important for you, if you are in the right place at the right time with the right asset, then you come out of this thing on the other side with income that you cannot outlive ever. And dare I say it, because this is a piece that's important to me, that I have a legacy to leave to my children my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren. And I mean, I'm hoping that what I'm doing will put them in the best position possible to always have choices, because that's what they're taking away from us. You will own nothing and you will be happy, except somebody owns something. Wealth never disappears. It just shifts location, right? So the goal is to have it shift your way. And therefore, you're in such a good position at your age to build that dynastic wealth. You just have to accumulate gold, because it's the governments, when they do those overnight resets, right? It kind of works like you got a spring and you're pushing down on this spring, and when you let it go, then it shoots in a direction. So if we look at where, I think it was Lebanon, I don't know, one I just did very recently. You'll have to forgive me. I go from thing to thing to thing. But like when they did their first overnight reset recently, you saw their spot market go up like 1,400%. In Venezuela, who's now had 4 of those resets, you saw spot go up 3,500, 2,000 times, etc. So when the government needs to get your confidence back, make no mistake, this is a con game and it requires your confidence. When the public loses confidence, which I think we're very close to, when the public loses confidence, then when they need to get it back, first they'll bring out CBDCs, give everybody a bunch for free and say, hey, this is going to fix it. It's not. It's just about getting you into the system and used to it. The way that you and everybody else are going to know that they have finished is when there is a component of gold in that new system, because that's what regains the confidence. But in the meantime, if you're sitting with gold, I can't tell you, globally on average, they do 3 overnight resets, but they could do, Venezuela's done 4. Maybe there's only going to be 2. I mean, I can't tell you that. I don't know. But you want to be holding that physical gold when that happens. And there's a whole strategy, again, that we built, well, that I built when I came in, but there's a lot of brilliant minds here at ITM, and we've tweaked it over these many years. And you build your own personal strategy that puts your best interest first. And it's based on your goals and what you have to work with and where you are. And that's what a strategy should be based on. And it takes into account sustaining your current standard of living, hence food, water, energy, security, barterability, wealth preservation, community, and shelter. But then there's also that huge growth component in there by buying an undervalued asset, physical gold, that is in a long-term positive trend. And you know that because when you look at a graph, you can see the higher and higher lows. So those are some of the patterns that I'm talking about that are simple to, understand. Simple, simple, simple. Keep it simple. But that's what we build our strategies around, so you can survive this, come out the other side in a much, much better place. And you get to prepare for your children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren.
Absolutely. And also, I think another key point to add to what you said there, Lynette, is to watch what they're doing, not what they're saying, right? There's always a lot of talk, but really, I think what is important is to see what's actually happening. And you kind of notice, right? Like there's central banks that are buying records of gold, right? So it tells you, watch what else is going on, pay attention to the whole statistics and kind of follow, right?
Right.
And set yourself up for success. So I appreciate that answer, very detailed. I think my audience will really appreciate that. And Lynette, a question I want to ask you that I ask every guest on my show is, the purpose of the podcast down the road is to inspire millions of people across the world to achieve greatness and enhance their overall well-being. So what is your definition of greatness?
Oh gosh, I would honestly have to say being surrounded by people that love you, that you love, and being surrounded by even the pieces and parts that you love, so that you just always are living in joy. And I mean, and it's not that there aren't times when you might get ticked off about something, but really it really is being the best that you can be. I never put limitations on myself, and I never put limitations on anybody that works for me either. You know, we're all autonomous, but it is, you know, I can honestly say that I am surrounded by people that love me, that I love, and I'm surrounded by beauty, which is important to me. I'm a Libra. I love pretty. My grandson and I have our saying, we like pretty. And then feeling like you're really, I mean, I know there's not one doubt in my mind, but I am living what I was put on this planet to do. So finding your purpose and actually living that purpose doesn't really take any courage. When people say I'm courageous, that always seems so funny to me because I don't feel courageous at all, to be honest with you. I am just doing what I'm put on this planet to do.
I love that. Beautiful definition. I think themes that I got out is following your why, you know, which leads to, you know, your purpose, and as well as, you know, staying supported with, you know, like-minded people or people that want the best for you, people that lift you up. So I really appreciate that. And Lynette, my next question that I want to ask, that I also ask every guest, is now that you have a good feel of my podcast and my show, who is a future guest, someone that you know that you would like to see on the show?
I would think Gerald Celente would be quite interesting on your show, especially if you ask him the same kind of questions that you asked me. I think he'd be a great guest because he operates very much from this.
The heart. I love that. So with love over fear, which is huge. Awesome. So I will note that name down. When I have him on, I will be sure, you know, to let you know. And
yes.
My final question, you know, you've been so valuable today. Where is the best place for my listeners, you know, to connect with you online?
Well, we have, you know, obviously our website, itmtrading.com. And we also have another one, beyondgoldandsilver.com, which is about the rest of the mantra and helping people get there. I also have 2 YouTube channels, or 3 YouTube channels now, because we recently started a Spanish-speaking channel, because everybody needs to understand this. And as we kind of get into that, we'll probably expand that more. But, and if they search my name, I'm pretty sure I will come up. And we're also on TikTok, which a video that we just put out on TikTok has gone viral. It's got, I don't know how many views now, but way over 1 million views, which I think is really interesting. And it's on purchasing power. So we're on all of the Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and podcasts as well. So we're all over the place.
Awesome. So pretty easy to find you. Congrats to on the TikTok. That's huge. Big props to you from my end here in Montreal.
Yeah, and I'm 68 years old.
I know, 68.
What is that called? Oh, viral. I'm viral on TikTok at 68.
You don't even know the word.
I love that. I love that. I would say you're my first 68-year-old who's crushing TikTok, who's just up there on my show. That's huge.
I'm not even on TikTok.
Awesome. Awesome, Lynette. And Lynette, I just want to take this last moment, you know, to really thank you for being here. You know, I'll definitely make sure to put all that in the podcast notes, but I want to really take this last moment to thank you for your time, your generosity, and your, you know, just givingness, you know, to keep sharing all your wisdom to others.
It's my pleasure to be here, Benjamin. I'm so glad that we met in Vancouver, and I'm so glad that we put this together. And if you invite me back again, I will definitely come.
That's awesome. Well, I would love to have you back. And thanks again for everything.
Thank you.